Samantha and her group of friends decided to kick off the weekend at their favorite bar. They indulged in more than their fair share of drinks, dancing the night away until the combination of booze and exhaustion took its toll. By the time the night ended, Samantha was thankful she hadn't driven. She knew Jesse would inevitably end up as her designated driver again, complete with his predictable lectures all the way home. Staying out late had become a regular habit for her over the past year or so, stumbling down the dimly lit hallway, barely managing to keep herself upright. Samantha's thoughts turned to her husband. She wondered if he was already asleep, and a mischievous grin crept across her face. It wouldn't be unlike her to make just enough noise to wake him up. The idea was oddly satisfying in her slightly tipsy state. As resentment bubbled beneath the surface, she clung to the railing and ascended the stairs. She passed the guest room without a second glance, her steps unsteady but determined. By the time she reached their bedroom, she had resorted to using the wall for balance. When she nudged the door open with her foot, the sight of the bedside lamp still glowing caught her off guard. But what startled her even more was the empty bed. Where the hell is he? She thought, her mind immediately racing. Instinct drove her to check the bathroom first, but after a thorough sweep of the upstairs, she found no trace of Jesse. Her heart pounded as she descended the stairs, noticing a faint light coming from the kitchen. Assuming he might have dozed off at the table waiting for her, she walked in, only to find no Jesse, just the stove's light left on. Irritation surged through her as she muttered, "He's going to hear about this when he gets home." Her eyes scanned the cluttered countertop, debating whether to leave the mess for the morning. That's when something shiny caught her attention. Dragging a high-top chair closer, she slumped into it and picked up the object, a wedding ring. The familiar weight of it in her palm sent a chill down her spine. Beneath the ring lay a pile of documents. Her passport, what looked like a plane ticket, and a sealed envelope. She glanced at her watch, 2:30 a.m., and debated staying up to wait for him to explain himself. With a heavy sigh, she laid her head on her folded arms. The unanswered questions swirled in her mind, and she drifted into a restless sleep. Samantha wasn't sure how she ended up on the floor, but the thud jolted her awake. Rubbing her face groggily, she glanced at her watch. 5:45 a.m. Realizing Jesse had returned home and left her passed out at the counter only fueled her anger. Determined to confront him, she stormed upstairs, but once again, the bedroom was empty. This time, she moved with purpose. Marching back down, she flipped on the overhead kitchen light, flooding the room with brightness. Confusion mingled with irritation as she swung open the garage door, only to find Jesse's car still missing. Her gaze shifted back to the counter, where the pile of items remained untouched. She picked up her passport, noting the outdated photo. She couldn't remember the last time she'd used it. The airline ticket to Florida baffled her even more. Her curiosity piqued as she tore open the envelope with her name on it. Racing upstairs to grab her reading glasses, she returned to the kitchen, clutching the letter tightly. Settling onto a stool, she unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words. "Dear Samantha, if you're reading this, it means you figured out I'm not home and have stumbled across the things I left behind for you. You've probably heard the phrase, last call in bars, something that's been a big part of your life these last few years. Well, consider this your last call. It won't shock you to hear me say our marriage hasn't been working for a long time. I wish I could say I'm willing to let it limp along the way it has, but I just can't. As I see it, we've got two choices. Option 1. You pack up those documents and join me. We'll spend a tough week figuring out if there's anything left to salvage. If you choose this, I'll be waiting for you when you get here. Option 2. We call it quits. We divide everything in the charade and move on with our lives. To be honest, I prefer option 2, but there's still enough left of what we once had that I'm willing to give it one last shot. I'm not here to analyze how we got to this point or assign blame. I just can't keep going down the path you've chosen for us." Samantha paused, staring at the letter in disbelief. Her mind reeled. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Jessie wouldn't dare follow through on such a dramatic gesture. Any moment now. She expected him to walk through the door, sheepishly apologizing as he always did. But as the silence stretched on, the weight of the letter settled over her like a heavy fog. Samantha scoffed as she swirled the last sip of her coffee, her thoughts simmering with bitterness. If he thinks threatening me with divorce is going to intimidate me, he's in for a rude awakening, she muttered to herself. Despite her irritation, she convinced herself to keep reading the absurd letter. After all, she'd already wasted this much time on it. Samantha, we've shared some truly wonderful memories and raised two incredible kids together. But as people say, staying in a broken marriage for the children's sake isn't sustainable. Now that they're grown and building their own lives, it's time for us to address the cracks in ours. If we're willing to compromise, I believe we can rediscover the love and connection we once had. It won't be easy, but it's the only way forward if we want to make this marriage work. Damn it, damn it, damn it, Samantha muttered, flinging the letter onto the counter in frustration. I gave that man everything, and now he's got the nerve to claim it's not enough. She paced the kitchen, her agitation growing by the second. Oh, he'll pay for this, all right. Just wait until he walks through that door. She stormed around the kitchen, her anger bubbling over. If he had even an ounce of backbone, maybe I wouldn't have to push him so hard. If it weren't for me, he'd still be in nobody's rubber peddling business. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder, he should be groveling at my feet, not throwing down ultimatums like some big shot. Who does he think he's talking to? His mother? Her anger surged, and she clenched her fists, stewing in her frustration. Samantha snatched the letter back and continued reading, determined to finish it. As I mentioned, Samantha, I'll be waiting for you in the plain lands, ready to start rebuilding our lives together. But you need to make sure you're on that flight. Samantha glanced at the plane ticket sitting on the counter, her eyes widening as she realized what he was suggesting. There's no way I can catch that flight. It leaves in 3 hours, she exclaimed, checking her watch. She shook her head and smirked. Mr. High and Mighty is in for a surprise when I'm not on that plane. Twisting Jessie's wedding ring idly between her fingers, Samantha contemplated her next move. And as for this ring, she said, a mischievous grin creeping onto her face, he's not getting it back without a fight. He'll have to earn it. But before she could finish her thought, the ring slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. Too drained to pick it up after a long night out with her friends, she left it where it lay. Right now, all she wanted was sleep. Dealing with Jessie and his ridiculous letter could wait until she felt ready. Unbeknownst to her, the letter contained more than just Jessie's ultimatum. Had she read further, she would have discovered the next steps of a plan already in motion, with events set to unfold in just a few hours. Later that morning, nursing a cup of coffee and silently cursing the lingering effects of her hangover, Samantha was startled by the sudden arrival of Jessie's two brothers, Jeremy and James. They marched right through the front door without so much as a knock. Excuse me, but you two can't just barge into my house. Even if you are Jessie's brothers, Samantha snapped, glaring at the pair as they entered. Jeremy shot her a cold look. Take your time finishing your coffee. We're just here to grab a few things. Jessie asked us to pick up. He replied curtly. Fine, but make sure you tell him he's in for a world of trouble when he gets back. Samantha fired back, her voice sharp. Without responding, the brothers made quick work of their task, hauling black trash bags up and down the stairs in 3 trips. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving Samantha fuming in the empty kitchen. They could have at least said thank you, she grumbled to herself, finishing her second cup of coffee and debating whether to make breakfast or lunch. She glanced at the clock and eventually opted for a late lunch. That afternoon, she met up with friends for some shopping, and since Jessie wasn't around, one thing led to another, and they ended up making a night of it again. This time, Samantha didn't even make it home. She woke up on Sarah's couch late Sunday afternoon, her pounding headache a stark reminder of the night before. For the second time in 2 days, she swore off alcohol. though she knew the resolution would only last until the hangover subsided. Jesse's probably at home wondering where the hell I am. Let him stew, she thought smugly before falling back asleep. By Sunday evening, practicality forced Samantha to return home with work looming on Monday and no spare clothes at Sarah's. She begrudgingly made her way back to the still empty house. Stepping inside, her anger flared again. He can avoid me all he wants, but he can't hide forever, she muttered, already plotting her next move. Sunday night passed uneventfully, much to her disappointment. As she lay in bed, book in hand, her thoughts drifted toward Jesse, not with anger, but with a surprising twinge of longing. Maybe I'll cut him some slack when he gets back. It's been a while since. Well, he does know how to satisfy me, she thought, a flicker of warmth stirring in her chest. It wasn't love exactly, but it was something close enough to keep her mind occupied. She awoke late Monday morning, the book still resting on her lap. The house felt chaotic, without Jesse's usual presence to nudge her into action. Samantha found herself rushing to work, arriving half an hour late and flustered. The day buzzed by in its usual whirlwind, and she barely had time to think about Jesse's absence until Sarah brought it up during a coffee break. "Where's Jesse been lately? Running like you?" Sarah asked with a casual chuckle. The remark hit Samantha harder than expected, reminding her of the event she had been trying to ignore. At 10:54 a.m., Samantha was startled when a man in a sharp suit approached her desk. Without saying much, he handed her an envelope. "Mrs. Samantha Gray, you've been served," he said curtly, pivoting on his heel and walking out as quickly as he had appeared. Samantha felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "That little jerk is going to regret this," she fumed, scanning the room to see if any co-workers had witnessed the humiliating scene. During lunch, Samantha and Sarah pored over the documents. "He's not asking for much," Sarah said, flipping through the neatly typed pages. 50% of the savings, half of his 401k, and you keep the house. Seems like he just wants out." "He's not getting a damn thing," Samantha hissed, her voice laced with venom. "By the time I'm done with him, he'll wish he never crossed me." The bitterness she typically reserved for Jesse spilled out with a vengeance. Fueled by spite, Samantha logged into their shared bank accounts during lunch, only to discover Jesse had already withdrawn 50% of their funds. She immediately called the bank, but the representative confirmed what she feared. Jesse had legally taken the money and opened a new account in his name. No trace of additional accounts could be found. The realization hit her hard. He had planned this meticulously. Seething, Samantha stopped at another bank on her way home and opened a new account solely in her name. "Two can play this game," she thought with grim determination. Back at her empty house, she poured herself a large glass of wine and retrieved Jesse's letter, along with the other items left on the counter days earlier. With a deep breath, she resumed reading. "If you choose not to board that flight, I'll take it as your answer. The next steps are already in motion. I've removed the belongings I wanted from the house and left behind the rest for you. My brothers will have picked up what's left by Saturday. On Monday, you will receive the divorce papers I had prepared months ago. This is your final chance. If you're not on that plane, it's the end. While I'll strive to be fair, contesting this will only make things uglier, and I doubt either of us wants that. As for our children, they've known for a while that our marriage has been little more than a formality. I suspect they won't be too shocked. Our families likely feel the same way. That's all I have to say until we meet again. If we meet again. If not, I truly wish you a good life. Despite everything, I hold no ill will toward you. Your husband, Jesse." Samantha's hands trembled as she reread the last few lines. The weight of his words finally settled in. "He thinks this is over just because he says so," she muttered bitterly. Her gaze fell on the untouched airline ticket. The idea of catching the flight seemed absurd now. It was too late, and Samantha had no intention of chasing after Jesse. Meanwhile, Thousands of miles away, Jesse lounged in a chair, engrossed in a new gadget he had purchased a week before. Gloria, sitting nearby, glanced at him sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Jesse," she said softly. "Don't be," Jesse replied without looking up. "This mess is mostly my fault. Maybe if I had stood my ground earlier instead of giving in to her all these years, things would have been different. Then again, who knows? At this point, I don't even care." Gloria hesitated before asking, "Did you really think she'd come?" Jesse admitted, scrolling through the menu on his iPad, "I promised the kids I'd give it one last shot." Gloria smirked. "Well, I guess we won't be needing both cabins now. But if you'd like, we can alternate cabins every night. That way we'll always have a fresh bed to mess up." Her tone was teasing, but the spark in her eyes hinted at something deeper. She leaned over, pulling Jesse close, and kissed him with a passion that had been building for years. Gloria had been a part of Jesse's life for over a decade, first as a colleague and later as a confidant. Her husband had passed away 8 years ago, and in Jesse, she had found a steady source of support. He had listened to her vent, offered kind words when she was frustrated, and reminded her to keep living. "Your husband may be gone, but you're still here," he had told her once. "Kyle wouldn't want you to stop living. Mourn him, yes, but then move forward. You're young, beautiful, and have so much to give." Those words had stayed with Gloria, and their bond had grown deeper over time. 3 years ago, she had left a simple signed card on his desk with just 2 words. "Thank you." Jesse had known exactly who it was from. For years, their connection had remained purely platonic, but everything had shifted 9 months ago. Jesse had arrived at work one Monday, his usual calm shattered, and Gloria had been there to pick up the pieces. With Samantha, it was always the same. Samantha's endless complaints, her lack of gratitude, and her refusal to see how much Jesse had done for her. He was done. Despite everything, Gloria continued to support him, offering advice and a sympathetic ear, but even she had her limits. Samantha's behavior had pushed her toward drastic action, and she had decided to help Jesse escape his misery. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Jesse made an unexpected offer, a 1-week vacation on the Carnival Glory. There was a catch, though. They would have separate cabins. "This cruise is my last attempt to salvage what's left of my marriage," Jesse admitted to Gloria. "Although, if I'm being honest, I'm almost certain Samantha will let it slip through her fingers just like everything else." He paused, his tone softening. "Even if she shows up, I want you there, Gloria. I need someone to help me come to terms with it all if this really is the end." Gloria smiled, touched by his vulnerability. "Of course, Jesse," she said warmly. They made their travel plans together. And when the day came, they waited side by side at Southwest Airlines Gate 26. As the pilot and crew finally disembarked, a wave of relief washed over Jesse. Without a second thought, he turned to Gloria, caught her by surprise, and kissed her. First gently, then with the passion he had kept buried for years. "I've wanted to do that forever," Jesse confessed, stealing another quick kiss before grinning. "Now come on. We've got a ship to catch." After checking into their respective cabins, Jesse and Gloria spent the day exploring the ship. They marveled at the week of relaxation ahead, shared a delightful dinner, and danced together long into the night. As the clock crept past 1 a.m., they finally broached the topic of sleeping arrangements. True to his word, Jesse returned to his cabin alone. But over breakfast the next morning, he made a promise, sliding a simple ring on a Gloria's finger. "This is the last time I'll ever sleep alone," Jesse declared. Gloria felt like she was floating on air, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Later that week, when they finally spent the night together, it surpassed all of Jesse's expectations. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely happy. On the final day of the cruise, Gloria suggested they skip the day's events and stay hidden away in their cabin, reliving the blissful moments they had shared. Jesse loved the idea, but reality had other plans. 2 people are expected back at work tomorrow, and I doubt our bosses will buy any excuses, he joked. Gloria considered asking for an extra day off anyway, but Jessie proposed something else. "Why don't you let me move in with you?" she asked. Though tempted, Jessie decided it was best to stay with his brother Jeremy while the divorce proceedings unfolded. Despite Samantha's barrage of insults and empty threats, Jessie remained unfazed. His newfound happiness served as an impenetrable shield. The divorce was granted, and the 90-day waiting period for finalization began. Even their children had grown weary of Samantha's constant tirades, eventually suggesting that if she had treated Jessie with love instead of contempt, they might still be married. Enraged, Samantha cut off communication with them for an entire month. 10 days before the divorce was finalized, Samantha spotted Jessie and Gloria's engagement announcement in the local newspaper. Furious, she fired off a scathing email, though Jessie barely gave it a second thought. The day after the divorce became official, Jessie and Gloria exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony attended by close family and friends, including his children, parents, Gloria's sister, and her parents. Each passing day seemed to bring Jessie more joy than the one before, as if life was finally rewarding him for his patience and perseverance. A month later, Samantha found herself sitting alone at a bar, the few remaining friends in her life scattered at nearby tables. It was 1:30 in the morning when the bartender rang the familiar bell for last call. Samantha stared into her nearly empty glass, the sound tugging at something deep inside her. "If only," she muttered softly, a faint trace of sadness breaking through her otherwise stoic demeanor. The bartender didn't hear her. Nobody did.